Hi, everyone.
Right.
Okay. I thought that didn't sound like me. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our workshop on the accession process and independent living. We have, well, I am, first of all, Rita Crespo. I am Human Rights Officer at ENIL, and I work on the topic of accession within the ENIL team. So we have here with us today also our speakers, Martin Muehleck from the European Commission and Suvad Zahirović from Lotos from Bosnia. So first of all, can you pass me just like a, no, there should be like a little thing. There you go. So I will start with some housekeeping rules. Or not, okay. Maybe I need to point over there. Maybe.
If you want, I can.
Okay. I don't know why that's. Oh, but you passed it. Okay, yeah. Now it's good? Okay. So first, some things about accessibility. This is to our speakers, but also to the audience when asking questions. And also later on, we will have some small group discussions. So it will be important to keep this accessibility in mind when we have the small groups. First, when you speak, you must say your name and your organization. You need to try to keep your points short and clear, using plain language. Do not use jargon, do not use acronyms, and be respectful and patient about one another's time. So this is not the... There we are. So well, I already introduced our speakers, but why did we decide that it was important for us to speak on this topic in particular? At ENIL, we have started reflecting more on topics that go outside of the countries of the European Union. We're conscious that many of our members are from neighboring countries. They're not EU member states. So the enlargement process or the accession process entails a lot of reforms, legal reforms, of discussion within the country and the European Union, and of investments. So this is a moment that can be a good opportunity for change. And as ENIL, we want that change to be positive for the independent living movement. And this is why we decided to work more on this topic and why we're here today to discuss with you and with our speakers about the enlargement process. And I hope from the audience, we will also get your experiences and your questions and later after the interventions, we will also have some discussion in groups that I hope will also help the reflections. So I think now we can maybe start with our speakers. I think I think we had planned initially to start with you, Martin, so we can do that. So Martin Muehleck is policy officer, that is right, at the DG European Neighbourhood Policy and Enlargement negotiations, which is in charge of the accession process. Martin works on the human rights policy on Ukraine regarding the accession, the European Commission. So Martin, can you tell us from the position of the European Commission a bit about the accession process and the opportunity for human rights reform?
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Thanks for the kind introduction, for inviting me. I work as a policy officer in DG NEAR, so which is actually we are changing the name since last week, because last week Commission President von der Leyen said we are going to be DG enlargement and not enlargement negotiation. So I think that might be hopeful, some sign that we actually enlarging the EU in the next 5 years. But I will explain to you a little bit that we will have to see. That is not so easy, and it's quite a complicated process. I personally work in the department dealing with the accession of Ukraine. I have other colleagues who work on the Western Balkan countries, Turkey, Moldova, or Georgia, which are also now accession countries. And of course, for each country, the situation is a little bit different. For Ukraine, we have the full-scale invasion of Russia and the destruction, the need for reconstruction. That is a very major factor, also in the field of the needs of persons with disabilities. But of course, the topics and the accession process for all candidate countries is very much the same. It is a process that has very rigorous steps. And my responsibility is in the step of, or the topic of fundamental rights, and the topic of persons with disabilities is one of several. And, but they are all very similar in the sense that the candidate country has to reach European standards and international standards in this policy area. So it's a, you can say it's a, many people are saying that actually when we talk about enlargement negotiations, it's not so much about negotiations, but it's more like joining a club. You have to fulfill the conditions, then all the members of the club tell you, you can join. So the condition in the field of persons with disabilities policies are the EU legislation in that field and the different also policy files, but of course international conventions like the UN CRPD. Those are part because the European Union has signed that. So those are the standards that are required to be reached for joining the EU. This, I can maybe give you a little bit my experience from Ukraine because we're in the middle of it. In principle, it's very similar to other candidate countries as well. But it's, I show you in just a few moments the process, and then we go to the practicalities. The process is a country applies for membership. The European Commission gives an opinion which says, in principle, the country is ready. We recommend to the EU member states to start that process. So this is where we are in terms of Ukraine, for example, since last year. We had some preconditions for Ukraine to fulfill in the field of rule of law, anti-corruption, national minorities. By spring this year, Ukraine has presented what it has done to fulfill those steps. And then the member state said in a process where all members, each member state has a veto. So each member state can say, no, not now, maybe later. And they have all agreed to start the negotiation process. The first thing, and that is what we have actually been doing last week, and I'm still quite exhausted from it, because we invite the country in my area, in this on fundamental rights, to give us a big presentation. We call that screening. So we check they have to check themselves, the legislation. Is this in line with the EU body of legislation and standards? They have to present that. And all our specialists, not only from me, from DG NEAR that deals with negotiations, but also all the policy officers from all bodies of the European Commission dealing, for example, on the topic of persons with disabilities, what they think about it. They ask questions, they check, and we have spent almost 1.5 hours last Wednesday, actually, on the topic of persons with disabilities. We had a big presentation by the Ukrainian government. Then we had the specialists asking, what do you understand that? Can you give some answers? The specialists who were here in Brussels and online, they gave us the answers. With some answers we were happy, with some we were thinking, maybe that was actually not an answer to our question, or there's more to be done. And in the follow-up until the end of the year, we write something which we call screening report. So we summarize on our topic here for half a page. Ukraine is there and there. and they have a good idea about what they have to do, or this is so basic we have to start from zero, and Ukraine needs still to be prepared to know what it does. So this is then what we call the screening report. We again give it to the member states, and then they might say, okay, let's start negotiations on this particular chapter of fundamental rights, because then we talk in the details. Okay, Ukraine is missing that. The country is having a gap here. So what are your plan for the next 4 years to apply all this, to adopt the legislation, and which is also important, to implement it. So that is, and then we have this negotiation process. And for example, it might take 4 years, or we never know actually, until we say, okay, now we see that the country is on the EU standards. At the time it is planned for the country to join. So that is for our topic here, persons with disabilities, but it's all for those hundreds of other topics as well. And only if we have a good picture on everything, then the member states can decide to let the country join the EU. It is one, there are some possibilities for exceptions or transition periods. Agriculture is a big topic, or access to the market. In most cases, this is very economic questions. I don't think that the topic of persons with disabilities will be something where we say there will be a transition period, because we say this is a fundamental right, and if you don't get the fundamentals right, then you need to wait until you're ready for joining. Can I take the question a little bit later? Because the last thing I want to say is how we actually interact with people representing persons with disabilities, because that is an important point, because a government can tell us a lot of things and we need to check that. So we check that with the civil society organizations, for example, in the country, in my case, in Kiev, where we say, okay, what is your assessment of the situation? How is the situation at the moment? What is the capacity of the government? Do they know what they're talking about? Are they taking real steps to implement the law, and so on? And they provide us at the same time a report, what is the situation? So for Ukraine, 2 weeks ago, I got something which we call a shadow report by a group of different civil society organizations, which are all able to give an analysis of each topics from their perspective. And then we can say, okay, and we can check. We get also that from contacts and discussions that our colleagues in the EU delegations have, where they attend, they see the situation on the ground, and then they can also give us a critical assessment of that. And this comes into the overall discussion at this stage of the process, but also very much in the beginning and basically all the time. Every year we write this enlargement report, and also there's one chapter on persons with disabilities, and where we of course talk with civil society organizations, representatives, to see what is missing, what is the development of over the last year, and what should be improved. And we give, of course, then recommendations. Saturday, I finalized the chapter for Ukraine, and also our recommendations that we would have for Ukraine, which will be published probably in a month's time. So this is the situation we have. So there's if you're a member of civil society organization, talk to my colleagues in the delegation, talk to other civil society organizations that cover, for example, fundamental rights in general, that they are aware, because sometimes this is a problem that everybody is working on his or her topic, but then you don't get the full picture, and the communication is sometimes difficult. And of course, talk to your organizations that represent Europe as a whole, because they are also knocking at our door here in Brussels. So this can be done online, personal meetings, emails, of course, everything is nowadays possible. That's a little bit from my side.
Thank you, Martin. It's difficult simplifying such a complex process, but I think you've done a great job at this. And thank you for sharing about all the updates regarding Ukraine and the process. So now I invite the audience. We have a microphone, so I'll stand up and hand it to whoever has a question. Thank you. So there was already a question, but don't hesitate if there are more. I'll go give you the microphone. Does it work already?
Hi, my name is Nicola Sommer. I'm from the Austrian Disability Council. So first of all, thank you for the brief overview. My question is, how do you define the level of which has to be met by the candidates? Because if we're talking to CRPD, I think we can all agree on the fact that none of the EU member states, as of now, fully, how do you say, fully, I think you know what I'm trying to say is like, none of them is fully, compliant with CRPD as of now. So my question is, how do you define a level? And is this something we could, as like civil organizations, civil society organizations, could we have a look at this? Is this somewhere public to be seen so that we could say, okay, this is actually the minimum criteria to enter the European Union? So could we also use this as a measurement for our own already in the EU member states? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a difficult question for candidate countries. I don't want to say what member states should be doing, because then I get probably into trouble, because I'm not a specialist on what the measures should be if they're not fulfilled. But I can tell you that I don't have a detailed checklist for example, when I look at Ukraine or others, because it has you have the principles, and the countries need to, on the one hand, apply the law, which is sometimes very clear cut, for example, on the cards. And then you have something where a member state needs to have the specific legislation. And when we have the specific legislation, that's the easy part. It becomes more difficult where we have EU directives or other areas where the legislation or the standards say where we should be going to. And then it is also our assessment if this is sufficient or if this is not enough. For example, I can say if we have a candidate country that has quite low levels of accessibility standards application. So I know Ukraine, but I'm sure in other candidate countries it's very similar. Then we cannot say, okay, in 3 years you have to solve everything, because we know that this is not realistic. But if we cannot accept the argument that a candidate country says this is realistic in the first place, so we don't start doing anything. So if we see, for example, that a good example is Ukraine, reconstruction of the country, destroyed houses. So if you have destruction, you have housing, and you rebuild houses, and you don't do nothing about accessibility, then we say this is not enough. If you have, for example, a realistic quota saying that if you have a block of flats and then the ground floors should provide accessibility for a certain quota, and we say, okay, that's a concept that might work, and then we see if that is enough or if this is already a progress or not enough. But then every country has a different starting point. And for example, Ukraine has the starting point that this is already quite a serious problem. At the same time, the country is at war, and we're expecting, we don't know how long the war will take, but we will have every month increasing large numbers of people who have been blessed and injured during the war and will be persons with disabilities for the rest of their lives. So that is a different, and they, for example, need to have access to employment in a certain time and so on. But we also know that the country is very poor and doesn't have money. So it is a assessment from civil society, also from us, what is realistic and what should be the right progress to support the country at the same time. What I have mentioned is we also have support programs, financial support, where we also try to help. And in the case of Ukraine, there's the special funding, Ukraine plan, where we say this should be also part of the reconstruction plans. So here we have a measurement, a possibility where we can support that further.
Hi, I'm actually a colleague here in the Parliament. I actually don't work on disability, but I have been following kind of what the EU has been doing the last 3 years or so. But something that kind of shocked me is this is like obviously a conference on independent living, and it has been found, maybe this is more a question for colleagues in DG Regio, but it has been found that EU structural and social funds have been used to fund like institutionalization in Bulgaria and Romania. So how can we prevent that? Like if it's happening in member states, it's pretty similar to your question. If it's already happening in member states, how can we prevent that happening in Ukraine? And I suppose I understand that funding, it's compliance is difficult in the sense that I know that you give out there's a lot of different funding programs, and it can be hard to ensure compliance. But I suppose, how can we kind of promote a culture of good practice, especially in the member states already, especially in the newer member states like Bulgaria and Romania that I mentioned, that the funds actually go towards independent living and not group homes, not institutionalization, because it's an issue that's brought up every now and again, like especially like at the Petty Committee's annual disability workshop. There's a segment every year for the last 3 years about the maluse of EU funds. Again, I think maybe this is more of a question for your colleagues in DG Regio, but if you have an opinion on this, I'm quite curious to hear it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually for inside the EU, I'm not a specialist too much, especially for regional funding. But what we see very often with candidate countries, they tell us, why should we be doing it? Member states are not doing it either. And why should we make this effort to join? And basically, we have to be very blunt here when we discuss with them. Yes, that's a problem inside the EU. And if I'm informal, I would say this is a problem we don't want to repeat or to have again. So that's why standards for each of the new member states is actually higher than for recent new member states. So for 20 years ago, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, they had different entrance levels in all policy fields. But in the meanwhile, we have been increasing the standards, and the current candidate countries need to meet those current standards, and even have, when they start preparing, they have already to start thinking about which standards will be there in 3, 4, 5 years, because that's their benchmark in the end. I know that issue of deinstitutionalization quite well, because we encountered that in Ukraine a lot, because there's a certain interest of keeping the system as it is right now. That was, there are certain jobs linked to it, to institutions. There are certain lobbies to it, and has been an attempt to change that, and actually didn't change a lot. And also during the war times, we have now the challenge that some of the solutions are actually going back to the old solutions, because they say this is the only thing we can do during the times of war, because otherwise are not possible. And we are putting in that country money in to have a deinstitutionalization strategy that is actually sustainable and works. We are supporting UNESCO on that. UNICEF, sorry. And their task is also to guarantee that there's a follow-up, that people know what actually deinstitutionalization means. There's also buy-in by the government. But we are following that very carefully, because you can change a little bit of the details, and suddenly the reform is only a reform in name, and it does not change the situation of people. So we must be very vigilant in checking that, and also making sure that this works. For example, I always come back on Ukraine. I'm sorry for that, because I don't want to say something wrong on other countries, but we have in the enlargement report saying, okay, deinstitutionalization reform needs to work for children and for adults. And this is something that needs to be started. And if every year we revisit this idea and say, okay, you haven't done anything, or nothing has happened, or we're not happy with that. Before that, before the enlargement process, we were saying those things, but nobody really cared too much because there was not a kind of way to push. Now with enlargement, we see this is happening. So that's a way in terms of how the funding is allocated. We are also checking then sometimes what the budget allocation is, but we have to check on the ground. And I believe that colleagues may be working on structural funds, regional funds in current member states. I'm not sure if they always have the possibility to look into that because they rely very much on the country's own reporting. And that is maybe sometimes quite a big issue. There's 2 questions, yeah.
Hello, my name is Yulia Sichuk and I'm from Ukraine.
Привет.
So yeah, I have million of questions, but 2 of them. As head of organization of people with disabilities who are actually from the first days of the war provided support for people with disabilities ourselves and built national mechanism for this. And last year we started the institutionalization issues. I know really few organizations who even know about EU advocacy, such phrases even, and they don't have people with disabilities and local organizations. They don't have access to this type of involvement. And I'd like to ask, how do you see active participation in EU accession process for people with disabilities in Ukraine, how we can improve this? And the second question is about key areas. You mentioned the institutionalization, I think employment, but regarding to that we really it's really difficult to follow all EU standards and all standards which are set in the CRPD. What are key areas and standards regarding, again, fundamental rights you are interested in and to which we as a country in the war should pay attention?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your work.
No, thanks a lot. And actually, that's in terms of linking to communicating what how individual groups can come in. It's sometimes very hard for one individual group outside of Kiev, let's say, to show what needs to be done. What we have done for this enlargement process, we have a group of civil society organizations that cover all of fundamental rights, and it's coordinated on that side by Zmina, and they are basically the ones collecting it. I don't have the expertise to see who they talk to, but I think they have talked to a lot of people. But of course, you share the information maybe, and also tell that this is maybe what has been missing. In terms of prioritization, it's also sometimes interesting to see the difference, because we say for joining EU standards, you have to do this list. And we will have this in early next year, the screening report, where we say this is missing on this topic by Ukraine for these pieces of legislation. But this is something Ukraine needs, or a candidate country needs to do to join the EU. But this might be different of what a country needs to do to improve the situation of people with disabilities right now, because that could be something different. Because after all, we are a bureaucratic institution. We are lawyers, and we talk about the law and of this club that is the European Union, and for people that want to join. But if you say in 5 years a country could join, in 5 years they need to be ready on that. But in those 5 years, there are so many problems that need to be solved first. Then I think it makes sense also to say, we focus on that. For Ukraine, it's special because we have this EU funding for Ukraine, the Ukraine plan, where we say, okay, reconstruction of the country should also take into account the needs of persons with disabilities, and we will check on that. But for other countries, it might be linked to funding by the EU or other topics. But there we would look more at the needs of the people who are have a lack of access to housing, employment, and other issues that are most urgent at the moment. So that's a bit the situation, but yeah, we can maybe later discuss further on Ukraine specifically.
We have one last question and then we'll move to the next speaker. Do you want me to hold the mic?
My name is Martin from Austria. I hope you can understand me. We have a very funny situation. Austria, as you know, we are in both European Union. We signed the UNCRPT, but still we are not participating and things like personal assistance, things like the incident or the institutionalization. Our problem is that my government, the federal government, signed all these treaties, but due to some misunderstanding on the federal level, we accept all these things. But when you go down on the Länder, we are divided in provinces, and our Länder doesn't fulfill the thoughts at all. So it's kind of a law issue, because my government, as a country like Austria, we signed the treaty, but our members, our underlying members, doesn't give a shit of the idea of the UN Convention. So maybe the EU has some ideas, because when you put it like this, we would never ever have such progress, because our land will ever take some action against fulfilling the UNCRPT. Thanks.
Thanks. Are you talking about EU member state or outside? Can you?
Austria, yes.
Austria. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, inside, I know that we have this mechanism. If something is not being implemented, then there's legal remedies that you can have, which take a lot of time and maybe sometimes end up in not a helpful way. Yeah. And for candidate countries, we are a bit freer. We can say, yes, you have the law, but actually you don't do anything about it. And so if the law is an empty word, then we say, okay, we don't say that the country is ready. So we have this kind of also political leverage or power where we can say, we're not happy, improve, otherwise you don't get the green light here. And that is something we use. And what we maybe also use is also saying, we see you have problems implementing, for example, the CRPD. And here's a project we're happy to support and fund to bring you up to this level. I'm sure we will never have enough funding available for all things, but where we say, okay, this is where a country is struggling because the regional administration, the lender of a candidate country, doesn't have people who know what they need to do. So we can provide some support on training on that. This is for a member state, we cannot do that actually. And it's a pity because sometimes I have also the feeling that we...
One more question, sorry. But maybe you can look at some funding when we put caretaking facilities funded by the European government. Why let you pass money to Austria to build such big institutions? I never can accept this because it's the money of the European Union, which was spent 3 or 5 years ago to build up exactly the same institution like we did 50 years ago, and the EU accepted it. So it is very funny because it's your money we need, and we took your money to build a new institution. This is very bad. Thank you.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I see the problem, but I cannot read too much about it. So thank you. Yeah, so you probably know better than I do.
Thank you everyone for the questions and for all your answers. Also, I think your answers were very frank, and I really appreciate that. Now that we talked about the general framework of the EU and the case of Ukraine also, we will move to Bosnia with our friend here, Suvad. So Suvad, can you tell us the experience of your organization and the experience of working with your advocacy objectives on the EU accession, and also about the situation in your country? Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Rita, for introducing me, and thank you, ENIL, to give me opportunity to talk in this workshop. Other way, I will find a solution to talk anyway, you know. And I'm disability activist almost all life because I'm born blind, and also almost all my life I'm trying to living independently, which is not case for many people in let's say countries which are in accession process. It's nice that Martin mentioned countries which are in front of EU door, meaning want to be in a club, and fast I count, and according my counting, it's about 120 million inhabitants. Imagine if 15% of 120 million are persons with disability. That means almost, I don't know, 20 million people. So that show how important process of reforms is for about 20 million people with disability in all our countries. And only what I know in the beginning of my presentation is that I will make mistakes in English because it's not my, let's say, mother language, and I apologize for that. Other way, I have a dilemma, either to be serious in my presentation or make a funny.
People feel like funny. Yeah.
Okay, then, no problem. So in the beginning, I will say that theoretically, love is nice, but it's a little bit different in the praxis, you know. So imagine we are talking about inclusion of independent living in process of accession in a countries or in a countries in which independent living still is not a major issue within the disability movement, and also approach to our disability issue is mainly based on medical and merciful approach and charity approach. So most of people with disabilities blocked and dependent on support of their family members, and states are creating policies which isolate people with disability. We discussed today about it, and almost years we discuss within the independent living movement about the institutionalization, but at the same time, in the countries which are in accession process, a huge number of people with disability is still in institutions, and they also need some kind of intervention in those institutions by the states to provide minimum quality standards of living in those institutions. And we, as advocates, we need to take care about this as well as to advocate for the institutionalization at the same time. So I would like also to mention capacity of disabled people organizations to follow all these processes, high policy processes. If we take in consideration that most of disabled people organization in almost all of those accession countries don't have space, don't have human resources, don't have finance to maintain proper activities, and those who have some kind of capacity, their capacities are almost depend on different project funding. There is no systematic funding support by the states from budget or through budget, and that's really a problem. And you know, most of disabled people organization, they provide services which states are obliged to provide, and doing so, disabled people organizations amnesty states from their obligation, from their resources they should support, they should provide to establish all those services people with disability need. So this high-level policy is, let's say, closed process between EU institutions, either here in Brussels and in the States, and also EU delegation or embassies in our own candidate states, which means that most of us, organizations of persons with disability, really don't have a capacity or just formally have opportunity to participate in a process of consultation. Most of those consultations are made through civil society mechanisms for consultation, and in Balkan region there is one, let's say, long-term program through which civil society organization could be consulted, and disabled people organization within that program are underrepresented, meaning also don't have a capacity to participate in this, and most of that consultation processes are inaccessible, don't take care about, you know, accessibility and all other need, as we heard this morning, need to be provided by those who offer consultation process to accommodate people with disability organizations or individual with disability. So other way is also annual European Commission reporting, meaning that annually European Commission published reports about status in each candidate country, progress report, and also civil society, meaning disabled people organization, can participate in this process. But as I already mentioned, it's let's say quite complicated for disabled people organization to participate in this, because they are under capacitated and don't have resources to do or to participate in this. Also, I must say that priorities in EU support for countries in the Balkan regions are, you know, connected with the free priority, good governance, green transition, and infrastructure. And in these three areas, it could be possible to influence somehow you know, to provide conditions, especially, for example, in accessibility area or in good governance area, to make changes in the law, which disabled people organization already do on the country level, you know, participating in some consultation process regarding changes of laws related to disability, etc., etc. And at the end, I must say, as I said in the beginning, most of disabled people organization don't have a capacity. And even less disabled people organization are promoting and struggling for independent living. That's somehow exclusive movement in the Balkan region, especially, and really most of people with disability is depend on support provided by the families, nobody else, and they are somehow isolated and excluded. So that means that, I don't know, through programs European Commission or have in a, or finance in our countries, pre-accession countries, need to be more focused on support projects for, let's say, changes or promotion independent living and human rights of persons with disability, as well UNCRPD and European Disability Strategy. Example of our organization, we are celebrating because after years of work, Information Center for Persons with Disability, Lotos, this year is first time that we get EU finance project in which we are a lead organization. As we heard this morning as well, most of disabled people organizations are lucky if they are chosen as a partner in within the project's big humanitarian or human rights or civil society organization implementing related to disability issues, in which disabled people organizations are just like chosen like somebody who is there just to fulfill criteria that they apply for the projects in which they have disabled people organization represented formally, you know, and that's more or less confused situation, as I explained confusely. And at the end, I will say joke. It was like funeral because mother of one guy died, and everybody was sad except him, and he's just smiling, you know. And his friend asked him, "Why you are smiling? Because your mother died." And he said, "I don't need to be sad because I offer her everything, you know." So everything is offered to disabled people organization, and I don't know. It needs to be much more offered in a way to raise capacity and to support disabled people organization and people with disability to be really involved in a process is important for all of us, like independent living for sure is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for the project. That is great news that you got this financing. I'll open now the floor to the audience for questions. Are there any questions? If not, we can. Well, okay, thank you. I'll go ask the question.
It's better to ask question than work because Rita prepare for you, you know, some task. Better ask us than work.
I guess I have a question for both of you. You referenced quite a lot about like the participation of disabled people's organizations in the accession process. And I'm just wondering to hear from both sides, how can like the EC facilitate the participation of disabled people's organizations, and how, as you, as a representative from a disabled people's organization, how would you like to be included in the kind of accession negotiations, or in relation to the European Neighbourhood policy kind of funding, which you just received? How would you like to participate in that? How would you like to feel it? What's the meaning of inclusion for you as a representative from a disabled people's organization? Thank you.
Suvad, you want to answer?
Can try. You know, first, one way is to be part of EU Disabled People Organization Network. And I know that ENIL and EDF and other EU disability organization have a lot of policy initiative. And I remember during last annual assembly of EDF, it was one resolution about accession process and more specific funding to disabled people organization and disability issue. Another way is really to be involved in a process of consultation on national level. Unfortunately, even when we have a capacity as disabled people organization to participate, that's somehow one-way process. After pandemic of Corona, most of consultation move from face-to-face to online internet consultation process. And it's really hard to participate when you don't have a reaction, and when you don't have information back related to issue, to things you initiate. But for me, it's recipe is to be unified and to be together on the national level and on the international level. That's much more powerful and much more sure that we will reach target we want to reach through the process of consultation. And what else? I have, yes, I have in mind. I remember when European Commission sent a comprehensive questionnaire about laws and policies in different areas in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it was one chapter about social policy and disability and minority issues. And you know, it was really funny because the official government representatives who were in charge to provide answers, they asked us to help them, us from disabled people organizations, how to formulate answers to those questions, you know, and we helped them, although they were in charge. And it was a situation, we were invisible, although we give or we provide answers for those questions, you know, and that's really funny because our capacity was recognized by the state representatives, and at the same time we didn't have opportunity to answer questions directly to the EC, you know. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Oh.
No, I just can maybe complement that from my perspective, because sometimes when we see the reports from a government, we always think, I'm wondering who was writing that. Sometimes you see from the language and the ways, there's a good collaboration, and I think this is also important that the ministries know who to phone if they have questions or if they don't know what the European Commission wants. Maybe the art is that they are not only phoning you when they're in trouble, but that they are also phoning you or maybe hiring you to formulate the policies. And that is probably the difficulty. What is also in the interaction with us important sometimes is that if there are organizations that reach out to us are also unified. So there's maybe one voice of persons with disabilities, and maybe even more if it's sometimes not only representative of certain groups with certain interests, but for example, if there is, I don't know, a collaboration of different groups on topic like transport or housing, where you have people, persons with disabilities together writing down a position with persons who are socially vulnerable or are from certain minorities that have problems access to housing. Or I'm just inventing the examples, because then if you say this is, you know, this is even larger, and here they summarized everything that needs to be done, then even this voice is stronger. From my experience, I sometimes see that, you know, if it's something that is written by the Association of the Persons with Disabilities, this goes to the ministry and the people work on this particular topic, but they don't talk, for example, to the Minister for Housing or the ministry, or there's people with the money for housing only listen, but are not able or have more important in, I'm citing here, other issues to do. So your views have less impact. So that might be something I can see from my experience that is maybe also useful for you.
Thank you. I think if there are no more questions, maybe we'll pass to the working part. I swear it's not gonna be that much work. Okay. So I prepared, I'll prepare an interactive session to work in small groups, but first I'll explain a bit what it is, then I'll hand the information also so everybody has it. So we'll divide in a few small groups of about 4 to 5 people. Each group will work on a specific topic and then we'll report back. And the idea is that I created a country, is the country of Candidato, that has now become a candidate to the European Union. This country is a neighboring country to the EU in the Western Balkans, and the population is about 4 million people. The government estimates that about 10% of the population is disabled. Candidato is a middle-income country with lower quality of living compared to the European Union, and Candidato used to be part of Yugoslavia. But you in the groups, you are part of a disabled people organization that is called the Union of the Disabled for Independent Living. We will call it UDIL. And UDIL is a member of ENIL and fights for the right of disabled people to live independently in the community. The thing is that now that Candidato is a candidate to the European Union, the accession process has begun. UDIL is starting to reflect, how can we advocate for this process? Because we've never done it before, but we really want to seize this opportunity and achieve some advocacy objectives. So I will hand you some, I have some in large font. I also send them to the email for people who need to use the electronic version. And each of these has what I just said, but also has some specific information on one topic. Each group will work on this topic, and they will reflect based on the information on what are we going to do to achieve this objective using the accession process. So some things you'll think about is what exactly do we need to do? What will have the most impact on the needs? Who do we need to target in terms of the ministries, in terms of the European Union delegation, and who are our friends who will help us in the process? What are the key messages? What do we need to say to convince decision makers? What are the key moments, the key opportunities? Do we use reports? Do we use specific conferences? And then at the end, we will each take a bit of time to report what was said in each of the groups. So now I'll ask you to form groups, maybe at about 4 to 5 people, with people you're sitting around, or I don't know, maybe just choose people you're sitting around, and I'll hand you the sheets. Thank you. So you will work on achieving an institutionalization strategy. Because there's no the institutionalization something candidate. Yes, for sure. Thank you, Cyrus. This is the one. This is the shorter version. Here you have the information.
in current local elections, we have 14, and if the opposite side has his down and his body is up and praise was I'm different. For example, fundraising financing. For example, international, they mental. If we know that lots of people with disabilities who have intellectual and mental disabilities are in the institution. So we can change that they to a new campaign for adoption of stuff, for adoption. You know, those kind of or if there is some, you know, issue report or you become aware of the media. Let's report current situation in the system. Another issue to research what kind of feasibility studies. It's so economic data that present how the community life is cheaper than life in the institution. That's another.
I mean, I did the instead of something.
For us, somebody else to present.
Yes, I mean, I basically, because we did the consultation and accession to the department. So that's where I got most of the information, even though I can't. It's probably. The number of consultations. Two and a half. Yeah, but I checked that it's numbers that. We even have a. There will be no union. I like the name of union of the state. Are you guys more or less done? Can we need one more minute or it's okay? Final thoughts? Okay. So let's thank you so much for working on this and for trying to make the country of Candidato a bit better. But now I want to hear what you discussed, even though I was listening a bit, but also so we can exchange among the two groups and see what you came up with. So we'll start with group one, who was working on the policy change of adopting a national deinstitutionalization strategy. So who from the group is going to report? I believe you were voluntold to, yeah. So You can just share a bit about what you discussed and the main.
This is what happens when people with disability give their voice to somebody without disability. We talked about strategy in a sense. First, we wanted to make sure what exactly we want to achieve. So we kind of name it deinstitutionalization from institutions towards community-based services. So that would be our goal, to create community-based services which will be more flexible, more in control of people who are using those services, people with disability. So first of all, we recognize our targets. That is our government who is creating strategies. And in our case, that's Ministry of Social Policy. That is the main target group. We have also our allies. We also have our enemies. Sometimes they're very hard to distinguish who is who. For example, organizations of people with disability can be both. Traditional diagnosis-based organizations are more likely to be pro-institution or at least scared about the going from institution to community-based services. And organizations who are for independent living, of course, are allies, but we should approach them in a sense to all disabled people organizations, in a sense that if we don't join our forces, others will decide. So that will be like statement to them, to this target group. To government, we have basically two key messages. One will be that if they don't work on that, I mean, we will not state use these words, but basically we will explain to them that they have to, because it's a European request. And also, if they keep on with institution, it's gonna create a lot more problems for them, because in our country, because this example is like our country, definitely. There is so many situations of human rights violation in institutions, and now it's kind of reflecting very bad on politicians, and they have a burning issue with that. So we also kind of explaining to them that it's also creating less problems for them. And last, but for us, the first, it's a human rights issue that they have to implement, cover. Yeah. And then we also have message from our experience. Actually, this is not exercise. This is something that we dealing in every day. Message for European delegation and commission, in sense that they should be very careful when they're giving funding to so-called disabled people organizations, because there is a lot of organizations that are international civil society organizations. They are very powerful, and they have sometimes some people with disabilities, one or two person who is their like model, and they get a lot of funding, and actually they maybe not build institutions, but support group homes or any kind of solution that people with disability don't have any control on. It's completely based on expert and medical model. So that funding is enabling them to do so. So in our strategy, like this is the targets, like how we want to deal with these groups and what are our opportunities. Unfortunately, as I said, we have a lot of bad situation happening, and maybe we can use that to point out these horrible human rights violations that's happening in institution, which we, for example, in Lotos we are doing. We had even protests on streets when we had human rights violations. We can use important dates like International Day of People with Disability, and also like Mental Health Day, because the breaches in psychiatric institutions are very, very bad. So to promote these good practices. But I think what we agreed, one of the good things will be that we know what good practices are, because we are living in countries where we have basically just bad ones. But there is so many good for example, when psychiatric clinic closed in many countries, this community based care in which people kind of did something like called peer support, supported living, but in control of people with disability, and all kind of good practices that we can come around. I know that in Sweden there is really so many good solutions, because just to say that something is bad will not work. We have to show that something can be good. And so, like we said, Zumbreta help. We say what is a problem. Problems are institution. What is solution? Community-based services in control of people with disability. And our impact is dignity and independent living for all. So this is like... So.
I'll let you add. If you have something to add.
Yeah, I don't have, I just have to say congratulations. Many experiences really involved in all of this and included. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it got a bit real for this group. I think this was not very fiction for you, but I'll let now the second group. So you were working on the goal to build a national personal assistance scheme. So who will be the person reporting from your group? So you take notes. So okay, and we can let others complete, of course.
So and thanks a lot for sharing this. We didn't go so emotional, but it's really a good take. So thank you. So yeah, our objective was indeed to try to think about how our candidate country could propose a PA scheme. And in terms of targets and allies, we before tried to think about who we could reach at national level, because this is something very political, which involves also state money. So we thought that first of all, we could go higher. So for example, trying to go to the office of the president, or really try to involve with our messages the prime minister. And then of course, work more with operational and executive people, such as the Ministry of Social Policy. And then, since it's something very political, involve MEPs, member of the national parliament in that case. And in terms of our targets at international level, we were of course thinking about the EU Commission and the engineer, or also specific people within specific departments of the future Commissioner on Enlargement. And then, of course, members of the European Parliament, EU delegation, which sometimes is very hard to, because maybe there is only one human rights officer dealing with a huge portfolio. So building relationship with EU delegation is something helpful. And then using also, as Suvad was proposing, using some national or European networks to have a united voice, and also involving perhaps some also agencies such as the Fundamental Rights Agency or the Council of Europe, which and the CRPD committee. So that's more like trying to identify targets. And in terms of how to do it and which are our allies, other OPDs, other civil society organization or advocacy or human rights organizations. And in terms of what's the best way of challenging, we also thought about really a first-hand experience, or using communication channels, using media to bring testimonies, bring the voice of person with disabilities. And yeah, that's regarding the first part. Please compliment me if I'm missing anything. And then in terms of key messages, we discussed about the the economic benefits of having a universal PA scheme, which could bring employment opportunities, which could also channel several monies from shifting the paradox between having isolation or a person with disability segregated in institution, then promoting an independent living mechanism and through a personal assistance scheme. And we want this to be universal, that could really reaches everyone, and ensure that also if there are no enough information shared about how to apply, so in order to avoid all the bureaucracy, that it can be a universal right. And yeah, and it could also benefit the fact that allowing person with disabilities to live independently, to have a PA, would also ensure that they can participate meaningfully, and they can bring their experience, their knowledge, and their expertise, and not really a person with disabilities are the first person who experience this, and they can really be considered in policy decision and shape this. And I think that PA should be as part of a government budget, in the sense that it needs to be there from the beginning, the needs of resources that should be allocated to this. And finally, regarding key moments that we could use and tools and opportunities to share those messages, since we are an accession country, we of course want to target the EU delegation, or EU events that are also not related to disability, EU conferences, or EU events where we could bring this point in, and providing, of course, input to Martin, to the enlargement report, and also to the CRPD alternative reports, so supporting PDs in providing input to the CRPD, and use the CRPD, of course, on this. And another thing that we were seeing is that sometimes, for example, the EU itself has a disability rights strategy, but it's not really tackling a lot of what is happening outside Europe. So bringing the EU accession as one of the flagship initiative, or also as one of the action point of the disability rights strategy, would be also a good opportunity. And then, of course, for OPDs to organize spaces, conferences, or moments where they could share their messages. So, and another good point was that sometimes we forget that human contact is important. So we could simply send an email, or asking for some bilateral meetings where we could use, maybe not thinking so big when we don't have maybe resources to organize things, but really try to target key people with our messages, and just maybe ask for a coffee or for a meeting, or simply write an email.
It's actually competition, so yeah.
Thank you, very comprehensive. Okay. I unfortunately only have 5 minutes left, but I still want to give a bit the opportunity of between the two groups, if you have any remarks about the others. I think we had some similar thoughts and some similar answers, and then still there were some differences in some thoughts that we had. Maybe here we talked more about some European Union specific actors. You talked more about the national level. So I don't know if you want to, if anybody has something to remark. We're all good? If we're all happy, then that's great. Thank you so much. Okay, that is true. But thank you very much for doing this interactive session. I'm very happy to hear the conclusions. And I would like to just let our two speakers react and say if they have any concluding thoughts from today. Do you want to go ahead, Martin?
Yeah, maybe. Thanks a lot. I tried to sneak in and listen a little bit, and I think it's I think very much about the practicalities, how to do that. And when I came here to Brussels 20 years ago, I started to work for a lobbying firm for industry. And one of the things they told us, go to every party, go to every event, just talk to people that you know, and give them your phone number. And sometimes some of the people are nice, and then you can talk to some people. And that was maybe something I learned now from the other side when I joined the European Commission, that just imagine all in ministries it's the same. There are a lot of people who are pushing files, documents, and sometimes they're very happy for direct contact. So, and I think that then you also get, you know, people who understand you better, and where you can say something in very clear terms. What is the problem? What is there? So cultivating the contacts in the member states, with other organizations, in your countries, with the European institutions. I think that's the best thing. If you have, sometimes it's a bit difficult if you always have the same person, because that same person gives you probably very often the same answers, and at some point you don't get further. But you know, going out and meeting people is important. And I think and the other thing is, of course, I know you're not huge organizations. You have only 24 hours a day and sometimes you want to sleep and see your family. so really have to see what of the many points you can do is actually something where you can say, okay, that's what we need to do right now. And then maybe we have partner organizations, then they can do something complementary, and you know, that find a way that is the most possible way for you to deal with. And because I've seen many also organizations that have been here in Brussels and try to do everything at the same time, but then they could not go into deeper or follow up. So there's maybe a paper, and then somebody reads the paper, but then next topic, and next week next topic, and you're losing yourself. And success is sometimes then very hard to get to progress in that way. So that's maybe some practical advice. But thanks a lot for allowing me here to listen in. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Very practical indeed. So thank you. And I invite Suvad to please give your concluding remarks and your reaction to the discussions.
Okay, as I promise, I will not be so serious. First, there is one old story about about Majnun and Layla. Maybe you heard that story. Majnun was one disabled guy, and he saw Layla, who was princess, and he fell in love. And he just saw Layla once, and he started to try to find Layla, and he tried to find her everywhere, you know. And people start to ask him, what you are doing there? He said, I'm trying to find Layla. And they said to him, you will not find her there. And he said, I'm trying to find her everywhere, to find her somewhere, you know. And that's same with us from Disabled People Organization. We must start to find allies, identified allies everywhere, to get some institutions, some individuals who will be our allies and who will struggle for our things, for our cause. And also, it's really important to be unified and to use every good experience, especially for us from countries which are in a process of accession, because our neighbors are countries who are already member of EU, or countries who already have developed policies we want to see in our own country. And when I think what to say as a conclusion, I remember when we as a Lotos group go to study visit in Finland, and it was autumn 1999, you know, and we saw in Finland at that time everything about we are dreaming to be in our country as well, and we really realize that our dreams somewhere are reality, and that give us a power to go back and to advocate, to struggle. So all this combination of different tools, different strategies, I'm sure will bring result and show that things are possible, even if it's not looks like as a possible things. So we never can stop. We always must struggle because it's our life, and we don't have a other. So if we want to live in dignity and independent, I'm sure that we must struggle and believe that it could be possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll have to steal one point you said and remind everyone that at ENIL, we are also your partner and your ally. A lot of you are members. Some of you, we are your members in the case of Julia, but well. So we are also here to discuss together, to work together, to exchange, to put people in touch. That's what we're here for. So don't hesitate to get in touch with me or with my colleagues. I hope to see everyone tomorrow at the protest. It's a very important moment. So it's a moment to also shout, fight, and be loud. Proud, strong, and visible, yes. And I just have one boring last thing to say, that is that somebody lost a tote bag, and they asked me to say that if anybody sees a tote bag with the Belgian flag, please let somebody from the team know, because somebody lost it. But thank you everyone for coming today and for your wonderful contributions.
Next week.
No, I'm part of the, I also work with the funds. So there's an event for the community of 2 days. Yeah.
The thing is about getting funding is
Thank you very much. Thank you.